Good evening. Please stand and join me for the pledge. I'll call the meeting to order. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we have some slight adjustments to the schedule, if the board would approve those. After the pledge, of course, was 2. 3, we're going to talk about PowerSchool Student Information System. 4, the resolution of Secretary and Nurse Resignation Initiative. 5, we're going to have Insight. 6, Raymond James. 7, Mr. Pettit. 8, bond and levy issue. And 9, motion to adjourn.
Do we need to,
Adopt the regular agenda. Yes, that number was not on there, but we do need to adopt.
Second. Wait a second, we've got the closed on there. Did you say that?
We will have a closed session as well for personnel records.
Okay.
Excuse me.
So that's going to be point 9, and then motion to adjourn?
9 would be motion adjourned, and then we would go into closed.
Well, to adjourn to closed session. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Call been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the agenda as read?
Yep.
Any opposed? Thank you. First, we're going to talk about PowerSchool Student Information System. The reason we're going to be talking to this is that our current system, we were notified, is going to become obsolete. We knew that at the beginning of the year. The central office staff have looked into some other systems, been vetting those. They came down with 3 systems that it was kind of between. They went between some other districts, had some demos, and have been doing some research. And you saw in your packet that they were asking for the Powerhouse Student Information System.
PowerSchool.
Sorry, PowerSchool, excuse me. I was watching as we were trying to turn my gain up. I wasn't quite loud enough, it seems. So, our PowerSchool Student Information System. So I'll let Mr. Pettit say anything else that needs to be added to that.
Yeah, that is absolutely accurate, Mr. President. So long and the short is that we always have to have this. This is our systems for taking attendance, tracking credits, enrolling students, creating transcripts, et cetera. You need to have this system. It's pretty much the backbone of your school. All the systems we looked at, we're going to increase the price from what we previously had at $38,000. PowerSchool is $12,000 more than that, but that was something we were anticipating. We are locking them in at a rate for multi-year on the plus.
How many years?
I believe that was 3, if I recall correctly.
I thought the rationale, everything behind it was pretty good. I like what you guys had done on this. So.
It seemed that also the PowerSchool system had some other features that we currently do not have as well. So with the improved cost, we seem to have some advantages as well that are going to be coming.
Yes, sir.
The versatility was a big strong point too.
I would move that we accept and go ahead and purchase the PowerSchool Student
I'll
Information
second.
System.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Thank you. Next, we have a resolution for a Secretary and Nurse Resignation Incentive. Currently, we have a board policy about principals and also for our certified staff. We are finding that as classified staff leave, being able to prepare, find what we need to do with attrition, moving people around, changes that we'll have for next year, that this is going to be a 1-year only incentive that we're going to put in place so that we can look at that to try to help reorganize the district. I'll let Mr. Pettit explain that more.
Also exactly right. As the board met and voted to go ahead and close Southeast for the next school year, that we know that means now the wheels of attrition need to start turning. A lot of your positions of nurse or building secretary, some are 12 months, and they're pretty critical to the end and the start of the next school year. So we believe a 1-year resolution to help us find out who plans to make that decision early and try to commit to moving our current staff only once is our goal in doing that.
Could you refresh us the date of that?
That would be...
Was it a March 1st date?
It
Prior
was-
to March?
It was February 1st when I went back to the email I shared with you and looked through the documents. So February 1st would be the motion.
And what is the incentive?
$1,000. comparable to the $1,000 and $1,500 we have in place as policy for a couple other positions.
1,500 is for principals, 1,000 is currently for certified staff.
And that's 1 year.
This is a one.
And this is a 1 year, almost
I've heard
less
that
than
before.
30, less than 30 days.
These 1 year things have a tendency to sometimes turn into 20.
I'll move we do that.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion?
I think it's important for employment that we have an opportunity to evaluate. If we know early that people are leaving, then it gives us an opportunity early to evaluate and have us some time to evaluate the appropriate people we put in a position before we're just in crunch time to have to throw someone in that's not going to stay. So that's the reason I support this.
Do you think it's something that we should consider maybe next year continuing in some shape or form?
I think that we probably should. If we're looking at that, we might also need to look at classified staff as well or other areas. So I know this came up a little bit to just kind of the current situations and current climate, but looking long run, we may need to look at something longer in the future.
Certainly could help with planning.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
Yeah.
We do it with the teachers,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
and I think when we have all these people, and especially with the turnover, it would be worth having something in place.
As we also move into contract season and negotiations with our groups, then that may be also something that they may wish to push forward and talk with us about as well. So,
Lots of landscape changes.
Yeah.
so with that discussion, the resolution would be for a 1 year, only up until February 1st of this year, for a $1,000 incentive for secretary and nurse resignation incentive. So all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
There any opposed? And we have Ms. Lance's aye as well from the back. Any opposed or abstaining? Thank you. Next, moving along, we're going to talk a little bit about insight denying, or with insight for the night. Mr. Hart, our friendly neighborhood face. I didn't get a Christmas gift. I feel like we've met each other enough. I ought to be on the list now. I'm just kidding. Don't anybody think I'm looking for in the Senate there?
All right. Well, thank you for having us back. As you mentioned, I've been here a couple times before you, so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail as I have before, because you've heard most of that explanation. What I'd like to present to you tonight is more for information that will go into the following presentations that you're going to take under consideration. So I do want to start, though, because it came to my attention that we may not have gone through Great Circle in enough detail in our assessments at the last meeting. So I just wanted to circle back on Great Circle to give us our review. When we looked at this facility, we did have our engineers look at this facility as well as architects. It was a little bit different in terms of kind of the overall feel of this facility compared to the other ones. This one has some kind of superficial and cosmetic concerns, maybe new carpet and painting the walls and some exterior cleanup and some broken sidewalks, stuff that is pretty easily repairable and inexpensive by comparison. But what did come back really well on this was the mechanical and electrical and plumbing report on this. So the bones of the systems and the structural system is sound, and there was no glaring or immediate concerns from their perspective. So I did want to point that out, where pretty much all the other buildings we're talking about tonight are the flip of that. So when I put these scores up against the other elementary schools, you can see how those line up. This is that FCI chart again. By and far would be one of the better buildings. It's a very similar score, slightly better score than Spainhauer Collective. The back half and the front half, we talked about that before. But overall, it's a pretty good building and would be one of the better assets in the community once it's on board. So I just wanted to run through that real quick and make sure that I did address those concerns. To just walk through our process and how we got to where we are here tonight, and what we've gone through to make these recommendations for projects. Wanted to run through just a quick history lesson here. So from October and November, architects and engineers visited each site, assessed the facility in person. as well as myself. I conducted interviews with each building administrator and tours of each facility. From there, we did one comprehensive facility assessment score, as well as did educational capacities. We conducted staff surveys to get feedback on a portion of that scoring to see what their perspective was. We engaged the community both online and in person to do visioning up front to understand the goals and the values of what this plan should tackle. We did a board work session. Following that, in December, we did a couple of community forums. We did virtual input at those meetings, did some downloads, some other community group meetings, and eventually came to the board last month and gave some initial recommendations. So that's where we are tonight and the amount of work that's gone in. So the idea is that this hasn't been done by a group of people coming in and trying to make any decisions on their own. It's really been rooted in the feedback that we've received and in working as much as we can with the community members that would speak with us or that attended those meetings or conducted the surveys, as well as the staff and the building administrators that were there. And pretty much anybody else I walked by in a school that I asked a question to. You never know. You never know who's going to ask a question. This is the chart that I've been showing a few times, and I'm not going to go through it again. I'm using it to track how these projects will impact and what they will impact and the decisions that we made going through. So this is straight from the last presentation. These are the percentages of the FCIs, and they're by school. They're ranked worst scoring facility on the left over to the highest scoring or best scoring facility on the right, and you can see how they're broken into the categories. So moving forward, we knew coming in that we're not going to be able to kind of rip off the Band-Aid in a sense and undo everything that's been done for the last several decades with the lack of large capital investment in some of the facilities. There's been a lot of maintenance undertaken. Maintenance has done great. The facilities are holding up, but there hasn't been that large influx of capital to really address some large items previously in the last several decades. So just so everyone understands the reality of that, the idea of us being able to come in and ask for enough funding or support from the community to fix everything in one move isn't really feasible, nor is the timeline of that. The amount of work that would come out from that would be so substantial it could be overwhelming. And in reality, not everything that's identified in these reports has to happen tomorrow. There's a large chunk that does. There is another piece that really should, and that's where we use a lot of the prioritization and the values and the goals from the community to make that decision on what should be included initially. The rest of this work can be phased, and we can come back for another round in the future and further identify the projects that need to go into that. And I'll explain which portions those are when we get to that section. So the first project we needed to address is the elementary level. Primarily because the buildings, all four of them are the lowest scoring buildings in the facility, and two of them were fairly substantially low when compared to just standards that we compare those against. And when we lumped these together, we did go before the community and put some scenarios out there, and we looked at what the deferred maintenance would be and how much would it cost just to fix the buildings we have, or should we add on to some buildings, or should we build new? We threw some scenarios out, and ultimately it came down to if we just invest in the facilities we have, we would need to spend about $17 million to just fix the buildings we have all the way. Go in, repair every wall, replace every HVAC unit, do all the plumbing, do all the electrical. But we would not necessarily expand those buildings or have a substantial impact on overall adequacy, and nor would that funding allow for any kind of fifth grade movement or anything like that coming into the system, at least at the time. Before the Great Circle building was under consideration. So that was one of the drawbacks, and it had a $17 million price tag. And when we asked the community at those meetings, how would you vote against renovating or building new, saying the new price tag was $28 million, almost 100% or unanimous decision said that at that value, building new was the better option or the better use of funding. So with Project 1, the recommendation is to build a new elementary school that would consolidate all the elementary programming, grades 3 through 5, into a single building. Right now, the idea is for that project to occur on this site here at some of the open property. That's at least the initial conversations. There's some challenges that come with that. There's some traffic and some things that we really need to work through and work with the city on to see if we can come up with some solutions on how to tackle that, but that's just part of the design challenge as we work our way forward. This alleviates the deferred maintenance that's attached to those four buildings and in the ongoing operational side of things to operate those buildings, which are very inefficient and they're a real draw on annual operating cost. And then again, just bringing them all into one space, there's got to be some sense of ease for a parent who's got students at the elementary system now that there's not multiple locations that they might have to go to on any given night or parent-teacher conferences. So there's a more of a unified feeder system into the middle school as well. So I go back to my chart and I've grayed out the 4 columns because option 1 took care of all those. So now we're left with what we need to tackle at the secondary level as well as at Spainhauer. And this is where the decisions have to be made, because there's still, you can see at the bottom, I'm still tracking like $25 million in deferred maintenance. And again, not everything has to be done at once, but there's still a lot of need out there to tackle. And based on the feedback we've got, the next highest concern that we wanted to address was safety and security. So when we look at that column, the bottom one, I've kind of isolated those there. We would be able to go into all 4 buildings, and we want to make a big push into those. And we want to address every building as much as we can. So some of the projects that would include at each building, and they might vary depending on the building, some of them will happen at all of them. Looking at all the exterior doors and the glazing that's with those, door position switches, and also the electronic controls of those, and just the overall keying system in general. There's a real lack of uniformity of the keying system. I think there's some systems that have been out there for a while. I think I've heard a couple times of, people might leave, still have keys, they've been around a while. And, there's something to clean up all the perimeter. When I say new doors, and it's not necessarily because they need to be safer, some of the doors are just aged. There was multiple buildings that I would walk out with a principal in, and then we would walk up to an exterior door and say, well, let me get my key out so I can unlock it. And we would just pull the door and it would open because it looks shut. But they're old, they kind of misshapen a little bit, maybe the ground's moved a little bit, and they just kind of wedge open. They look shut, but they're not quite latched. It just happens. It happens when they get older. And that's what that door position switch will happen. I was at a district yesterday, I walked every building, and it just has a sensor attached to that so that at central office or the secretarial station, if a door's ajar or unlatched more than 10, 15 seconds, it's not alarmed, it's not like nothing screaming through the building, it's just a notification that lets somebody know there's just a door that's unlatched, and you go down, you track it down, you shut it down. So it's just another method of safety at the perimeter. Most of the buildings that are left do have, when I looked at the scoring, electrical across the district, electrical scoring got hammered pretty hard. And what got hammered the most was the life safety side of things. I think that's the fire alarm systems, the voice and the audio, all the different systems that go into a building. So taking a look at each building and identifying where the deficiencies are and making sure that we just have a really solid, safe fire and life safety system in place. Improves secure entries. This will vary depending on what building it's at. Not all of them are going to be able to make huge moves on. The middle school is going to be a challenge. But just having a dedicated secure entry that we can think through and put a little bit better system in place for that will go a long way. But a part of that's also going to be wayfinding, directing people to the right entry, making sure that parking's identified where the visitors go, so people who come to the site know exactly where they need to go. And therefore, if you see somebody else who's not maybe following those directions, wandering around the site, like I made jokes a couple times, I did laps around buildings a few times, that there might be a problem there because they should know where to go by now. And then inside the buildings, the middle school, specifically the doors and the hardware at those are those glass doors we were showing you where lots of panels were missing. They're full height glass, it's very thin glass. Just going through and fixing all that. Just come in, replace all the doors, all the hardware, just get it up to today's standards. But also safety also goes to site work. And again, I'm picking on the middle school, site safety, traffic flow, anything we can do to just help parent pickup drop off, visitor parking, staff parking, all those things. So these would all be included in that. And then also it goes into the bathrooms too, especially at the high school, just making sure that we have an environment inside the restrooms where it's just not conducive to bullying or fights and all this stuff that can happen inside of restrooms behind those closed walls, and just taking a look at those and see if we can freshen those up as well. So we've got about $3 or $4 million set aside for those. It sounds like a lot. I'm going through a lot of things, but we might just be doing a couple things of each of these at each school, and then we'll continue to define those. So now we've knocked that. I've grayed out the safety and security. So now here's the problem. We don't have a lot of money left, if anybody's doing the math at home. So we're running out. So really, what we needed to pick next, and I had to go in and invoke some things here, because I would have loved to come in, done adequacy, and made better classrooms, and done a bunch of things like that. But what we need to be watching and paying attention to is the actual facility infrastructure at the middle school and at the career center. Several of those categories had some major deficiencies in our assessments. At the middle school level, or sorry, at the Career Center, the HVAC equipment was indicated to be well beyond its expected operating life. We've got some historical plumbing concerns at the Career Center, as evidenced by the flooding of the FACS program or the culinary program down there. At the electrical system at the middle school is antiquated and needs to be improved. And we also will be looking at the electrical system too from a safety side of things at the Career Center, make sure we have adequate power and the adequate kind of power systems going to places. We need to look at the HVAC system too, as I mentioned. The middle school has some areas that we want to look at. This is primarily at the Career Center. Anywhere within here, we'll be looking at it from an efficiency point of view. If we can make it more efficient and more easily operated, we will, because that'll affect long-term operational costs. That we'll be looking under that, guys, to make sure that we have a long-term plan to make sure it's easy and effective to operate. Plumbing infrastructure, as I mentioned, and then on the facades of buildings, those two buildings, making sure our windows, our roofs, and it's just our overall veneers are in good shape. There's some window concerns at the middle school we want to be looking at. So I've got $7 or $8 million set aside for that one. And again, someone's probably keeping track of the math here. I've gone over my limit, but you can see that we still have some categories left. And that's where I was mentioning, there are things that we had to prioritize. I essentially skipped the adequacy section because adequacy can be subjective, and adequacy, this building will get more adequate with the improvements that we're making. A safer space, a comfortable space, and a space that's working and operational will be a better learning experience. And we got to take care of those. It's kind of like Maslow's triangle. There's things that we have to take care of before we even start thinking of the next level up. Safety and security and the building systems are the bottom two pieces of that triangle, and we've got to get past that. And that's what this first bond or levy or levy increase would be taking care of. So when I sum that all up, I come to $42 million, which does exceed what we have here, and we know that. I just didn't want to come out here and misrepresent what we think the value of those projects will be. This number was bigger. It was $4 or $5 million more until we integrated Great Circle. So Great Circle took care of a grade level for us, so we didn't have to build a big of an addition. So that was the first creative move that was made that helped tighten this number up. We want to be respectful of what is being asked for on the community, and that's what the next presentation's about. But we're going to be creative on how we identify these. There's things that pop up. There's grants. There are other mechanisms to fund some of these improvements. It's not going to knock out a lot, but it can help us stretch those budgets. So what I'm telling you is we're going to try to do $42 million worth of work for $38 million. We'll have to come back, and where that might kind of get where we do a little bit of work and fine tuning is likely going to be in the facility upgrades. We may have to say, you know what, this project, we can't afford it right now. Let's put it on the list and try to get it out of operational costs in a year or two. We are not going to mess at the elementary level, or we're not going to mess with safety and security. Those are going to get done. We're going to do those all the way through. And we're going to do as much as we can at the facility end to make sure that as soon as we're done with this, we're not a year or two out of the woods and out of construction and some major system fails. That's what we want to make sure we're not in that position. So we're going to safeguard that. That's where the next amount of money is going to go. And then once we get past all this, everything's operating, and we get all these improvements made, we'll come back and evaluate the next step and see where the next round of money might want to be spent and go from there. So that is the end of my spiel. So that's the
Awesome.
overview of the projects.
Aaron, I got a question
Yes.
for you. And I don't know if this is in your bailiwick or not, but originally Great Circle was a heat source, underground heating and cooling. Did you look in to see if it's viable yet or not? Great Circle didn't do anything with it, but
I haven't looked into that in detail. I know the mechanical system scored well, and it's operating, and it's in those sort of things. I can find out. I didn't dig into that too much, but
Yeah.
that would. it's
I don't know what
interesting.
happens to them if you don't use them, but it's something to look into if it's usable.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. It's also good to know where they're at if they have them in the ground, because you can't do anything there. So,
I checked into that a little bit, Jack, and what I found out was that Great Circle itself, so far as the gentleman from Great Circle that I was asking, I assume they know, that Great Circle itself did not have that. It was one of their facilities out in the country that does have the heat source pumps.
Well, Mr. Carton told me that originally the main building was done that way too, plus the West House is done that way.
Yeah, one of them I know still is, according to the maintenance guy there now.
I'll reach out to
They
them.
may have just abandoned that
And
at
tapped
some
it off.
point for cost.
Yeah. It's Any other questions?
All right, sir.
Thank you, Aaron. Next, I'll have the gentleman from Raymond James. He was eager. He was on the edge of that seat ready.
Good evening. I'm Mike Reich with Raymond James Public Finance, and I've got my colleagues here with me as well, Greg Varnenberg and Dr. Alan Markley. And so you've seen all this construction cost, and so now you need to know how you're supposed to pay for it, right? So I'm going to go through, actually these slides are pretty straightforward, so I'm going to go through this relatively quickly in hopes of getting to questions and answers, thinking that that's probably of more value to you this evening. I also want to thank you for selecting Raymond James to be your partner, and when I say partner, I mean that. Not only your financial partner, you may know Dr. Markley and I have 34 years as experienced superintendents, and we hope to help you in a myriad of ways, and certainly Caleb's very capable, but we hope that we can help in more than just financing a project. So with that, I'm going to go through some slides here. This first slide is the history of your tax levy, and again, pretty straightforward. This is your levy over the last several years, and two things I'll point out. In 2002-03 school year, you were actually levying, that's your highest levy historically at $355, and then your low was in 15-16 at $275. So, and you sit here today at $283.53. Next slide is your assessed valuation history, and as you can see, most years, well, every year you've gone up, although some years very slight, and you have a 3-year, your last 3 years, you're averaging 8.32. That's probably a little skewed with one real big year outlier there in 21-22, and we're seeing that in most districts. Your 5-year average is 5.55%, and your last 10 years, you're averaging 3.47% increase.
I keep asking people, with that huge increase, and when I paid my tax bill, where in the world did that money go?
It was itemized on your tax bill, Harry.
I saw that,
Well, then that's where it went.
but it didn't get to us.
That's where it went. It's itemized by line on your tax bill. Go get your receipt out and look at it again.
No, I've got that, but
Well,
I'm
that's where it
wondering,
went.
where the heck?
So
will we
one of the
reassess?
slides I asked Mr. Pettit to bring forward was what the difference was in actually what the school district received from the change in revenues on the tax change. So as Ellen was saying, I went through my bill to see where the itemized things went to, and you'll be able to see they went to other areas other than the school district. And I'll just leave that there.
That's very astute, Mr. President. I was going to say that myself if you hadn't. And actually, you'll see later in the financing that we're assuming, we look at your assessed valuation history to project and forecast out, what it may be in the future, and you'll see that we projected out 2%. So we always try to be conservative. We don't want it to overpromise and underdeliver. So we are at 2% on our projections. So flip ahead to slide 6. And this is actually kind of overviewing the plan of finance. So this is the tax levy analysis for a certificate of participation, which is effectively a lease purchase. And this requires a 99-cent tax levy increase. And so a couple things to point out on this. I realize this is a very busy spreadsheet, but a couple of things to point out. This is actually a 25-year note that's issued in 2 series. So the debt actually will be repaid over 26 years, with each series being a 25-year note. We are issuing $10 million in 23 and $28.25 million in 24. And I should say, I'm assuming, this assumes that we're issuing up to that 99 cents. So, so that's the total construction dollars available would be 38 million, 38.25 million. Again, 2% annual growth is assumed, and it's issued in 2 series, as I mentioned. And the tax levy increase starts in year 1 at 60 cents And so we can begin to service that first series, and then it goes to 99 cents and carries out through the life to maturity. And slides 8, 9, 10, I'm not going to go through in any detail. They're very important slides because this breaks down how much of the tax levy increase it would be for your residential property owner, for your commercial property owner, and for your agricultural property owners. And so these slides probably have more use if you move forward with a bond issue and you're out communicating to the public. You want to make sure that you're giving them an idea of what a 99-cent tax levy increase actually means to your average homeowner. And so I won't go through those. I'll let you guys peruse, but they are there, and they're broken down in 10-cent increments all the way up to $1. Go to slide 12 is the, I'm not keeping up with my own. Thanks.
You got it.
I got it. Slide 12, this is the draft ballot language, and I won't read it to you, but you can see clearly that it's a 99-cent tax increase. A couple things I'll point out in there. On the first two words of the fourth line, operating costs is included, so this does allow you, the language has been written so that you can use a portion of the 99 cents. Depending on how big of a construction project you consider, a portion of this could be used for operating costs. That gives you the flexibility. And then, as you can see, on the third line, where it says until December 31st, 2049, and then the last line, until December 31st, 2049, that is a sunset, and so there would be a clear ending to this tax increase. Next slide is, slide 14 is the calendar of events. Again, I won't read this to you, but just gives you an idea of how things lay out between now and April, and then on, moving forward. And the last slide I'll spend just a second on. This slide is a little busy, but if you kind of focus on that line that's running through the center, that kind of yellow tan line that's running through the center, that's where our interest rates are today. So interest rates have gone up a little bit here recently. Okay, interest rates have gone up a little bit recently. You've probably seen this in the news, but still, if you look at where the interest rates have been since 1990 till now, this is still a very good borrowing environment, and interest rates are historically low. So with that, again, very straightforward. We're ready to move forward and be your partner, but most importantly this evening, we want to answer any questions that you have.
I was just going to say, I know we received your information, and it was a very heady read going through your book, even though I have some finance background as well. But it was very well put together and very explanatory. There was one slide in there that talked about what the average change, I think, of like $150,000 house and what that tax rate change was. So I don't remember exactly what that number was off the top of my head, but I do remember that being in there. That is something that probably is something that's a little bit interesting to our community.
You can find that
I got it
specifically.
here if you want to look at it.
What page is that here?
Page 24.
Yes, sir.
Calculation on various increments, and if you just focus on like $100,000 home, I think it was
Better
$50.67
Do you have this one, Ellen?
for $100,000. $15.67
Per month.
Per month.
Ellen, do you have this one? Did you have this one?
I haven't got it. Ryan's
So that'd
got
be
mine. I'll get it.
roughly about $175, $180, if my math is correct on that.
Yeah, $188.10.
That's why he really gets these numbers every day. huh?
It's a small price to help protect
Yeah.
kids.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
And that's really important, Aaron, that's a great word,
Yeah.
protect, because we don't have fancy athletic equipment in these numbers, we don't have new complexes, new athletic facilities, and, a lot of times when you see different school districts doing bonds and levies, that's what they're getting with it, and there's nothing hidden in this for that. This is truly to protect kids.
Bare bones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
And if you've never been in our buildings, and you haven't had an opportunity to really spend time in there, you have no idea what our kids are feeling when they're in there and they're not safe, or our adults. We can't identify the one. This is just, I don't know that you can really put a price tag with the amount of security and safety that our kids would feel moving up through our buildings, so.
Yes, sir, I'll recognize you.
To that point, and I think Mr. Pettit's going to mention it tonight, that even with the 99-cent increase, you're still, as far as districts comparable with all districts in the state, your levy's in the bottom third still, as far as the total levy.
Levy's in the bottom third, if anyone's listening.
We're in the
right?
bottom
Yeah.
of every.
We're
still with
we're also in
this.
the bottom 20 statewide, from what I understand currently, for every school district, no matter how many children that you have in it
And that's not a
across the
percent.
state.
That's a hard 20.
That's a 20th, yes. So without funds, it's always hard to give the other things that people want. So we also heard that nobody wants to go over $1. So we felt 99 cents was the cap on that, as well as our bonding capacity and things as well, so.
Yeah, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I was a superintendent in a very conservative community. And we always wanted to be able to tell our taxpayers that we had a low tax levy and we compare favorably. But we never wanted to do that at the cost of our facilities or the cost of our operations. So, yeah, it's great to have a low tax levy, but you want to make sure that we're, take care of our primary mission here.
Does anybody have any other questions or information you want to speak about?
Are you going to talk about timing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, then I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a good job.
Okay, I want to thank Insight Design and the Raymond James team for coming out so many times in person. I've requested that they do that. I think it's, for Marshall, I thought it was important, and the Board of Education thought it was important that we not grandstand, so to speak, and as a board or administration say this is what we need, but to get experts in here. And I really believe both of these groups have been very pure to their processes and making sure that they do it right. And that is, for Insight's part, really hearing what the community says. And I thank the board for their trust in that process and supporting that with their votes in this process. It's been really good. It's been good to meet so many people and talk about these things. I'm going to recap a little bit. I'm not going to talk for a real long time. But I appreciate everybody who came out tonight and everybody who's watching this at home, because I think it's, without question, some of the most important work I've been a part of. And as I've met more and more parents and students and staff, and I think that they believe it's pretty darn important too. So to that end, I'm going to hit some of the highlights. Any remaining questions, such as timeline, et cetera, we'll get into that really quickly. This is from Raymond James, put this together, which I really appreciate. Days like today where you're in meetings all day, it's hard to find that time to go digging into stuff. They are experts at it, and I appreciate them putting so many things at our fingertips while we might get tied up in the day-to-day. I'm going to reference this in a minute, but it is going to be out there for public informational purposes. Everything in the manuals that the Board of Education received tonight, from a district standpoint, is purely informational. What would the impact be? What has the levy been, et cetera? That's what this is showing, and again, I'll reference the specifics in a moment. I want to first talk about that Hancock Amendment, and this gets at the details of, when we have a levy and when we see that our assessed valuation increases and our tax bill goes up, what does that mean? Where does it go? So each year in August, the district sets that tax rate at a public hearing, and it takes into account the increases in assessed valuation. Marshall's community has seen increases in assessed valuation. With the Hancock Amendment, and I'll reference this quote here on the right-hand side from Nicole Galloway, our state auditor, that limits the amount of Missourians' income that may be used to fund state government to be no greater than the portion used to do so in 1981, except as authorized by a vote of the people. So in other words, if your assessed valuation goes up because of the value of your property, the voted levy that you have in place has to roll back to take that into account, so you're not paying more. That's oversimplified from a not accountant's perspective, but I just wanted to explain that. So in short, it's not necessary that your assessed valuation going up doesn't send all that money to the school district. It goes a lot of places. The district has had increases in recent years, which under that amendment require a rollback of the levied amount, which is why you see that it declined each year in the recent years. While it's fair to say the district has lost levy but gained tax base, this does not take into account inflation, which of recent has been extremely high. So to get into the details, just the brass tacks of it, bond versus levy recommendation. My recommendation is a levy. It addresses our operating deficit, and it also addresses safety and security. With a levy, it would pass if it goes on the ballot with a 50% plus one vote, and I think that makes it slightly more attainable. How much? That's been said before, but I'll say again, 99 cents. We, in the process that Insight Design brought to us, some of our own surveying and data, we don't believe that our voters and community would feel as good about going over $1. Could we say that we needed more, as Insight Design shared with you? Absolutely, we could say that, but we feel like we have to do everything possible for kids right now to get the voters to support our most basic needs, and we feel that our approach is truly our most basic needs, and we will stretch the dollar. Even after adding, as was stated earlier, the 99 cents to a levy, if we were to put that on the ballot, the public were to approve it, we would still have 64% of all other school districts in the state with a higher levy. You also will only be, if you put it into exact money, you're only 27 cents higher than the tax levy of $3.55 that you had in 2002. So again, thinking about inflation, et cetera, and what the district was operating in 2002, going back to that chart I said I would reference later, we're only going to be 27 cents higher than the district was in 2002. We're about to start operating at pre-2002 amounts, way before. So what is it for? Again, I want to just say this one more time. It stays under $1. But if we put it in human terms, it's for our youngest, it's for our future. Safety and security across the district, which is a major need, I'm telling you tonight. It addresses our operating deficit. It has the flexibility to do so. For our children and the future of our community, I share a quote with you that our children are our only hope for the future, but we are their only hope for the present and their future, which is absolutely true to me as an educator. They are depending on us for them right now, and it sets them on a course for where they go. That has implications for our educational system and our community. Specifically, as we've said tonight, one elementary, the operating dollars and safety and security across the district. When do I propose and recommend to the Board of Education to consider tonight? And I'm sharing this as much for the community, honestly, as the board. Obviously, this board's been working really hard and spending a lot of extra meetings like tonight. My recommendation is this April of 2023. That puts it in the same fiscal year as the governor's tax cuts in the state. So at the time that we're asking the taxpayers for a little more, the state is taking a little less in other areas to help balance it out. How much longer, is my question, do the children and families of Marshall need to wait? The question is, we've heard so many times the quote, if not now, when? If not me, who? Et cetera. The only thing that is ultimately real about your journey is the step that you are taking at this moment, and that's all it ever is. I love quotes. I was an old social studies teacher, as I've said a million times. But truthfully, there's so much pause we can have about maybe we should wait a little longer. Maybe we should spend another year and think about this. Maybe we should collect more data. All those arguments have validity, but our students need this right now. Closing some of these buildings, in my opinion, needs to happen as soon as possible. And it has implications not just for the buildings, but for the teaching and learning that goes on in those buildings. And as one of our board members said earlier, there's things and concerns that we don't necessarily have the right to share with everybody, but our buildings aren't good enough. They aren't healthy enough. They aren't safe enough. And that's a reality we can no longer deny. Steve Jobs quote, I've got to start with Steve Jobs. Being the richest man in the cemetery doesn't matter to me. Going to bed at night saying we've done something wonderful, that's what matters to me. And I certainly feel the same way, that I think it's incredibly important that we just feel and see the value in what we do as educators, as a Board of Education, as a community. So why? It addresses our financial deficit, which we've talked about, that we have a large and looming one coming our way when this current levy expires, although it's only 8 cents.
It addresses our worst buildings. It addresses our safety and security. It addresses our inability to have an effective long-range facility plan and maintain what we have. I think it's fair of the community to say, well, gosh, it doesn't seem like maybe we've taken good enough care of our buildings. If there's any point that I hope is being conveyed to our public tonight, it's that we have not been equipped to take care of them as well as some other districts. And when we look at districts our size, we have a lot of roofs. The more roofs, the more cost. We could be more efficient, but we need our community to support us. And tonight, I'll recommend to the board that they make the motion to help do that. And believe me, there are huge implications for teaching and learning, teacher retention, teacher recruitment, and pride. Pride is a word I think you'll hear a lot more in who we are as Marshall Public Schools, pride in what is possible for our children, our community, our future. I believe that this is a great step in building a stronger pride in our community, our school, and who we are. And we have a lot to be proud of, but we need to showcase it better. And this slide and the one after, I'll tell you, the next one is images. And it may seem like I'm perhaps trying to be dramatic or grandstand or something of that nature, but as an educator, as a father, and many parents I'm sure are in the room and listening at home, these are the things that we talk about when we're talking about buildings, but I got to put some images to it next. No secure vestibules, mold and leaks being a constant battle, students who are learning in trailers and no shatterproof glass. We can't lock and secure our classrooms from the inside. We don't have a master key system to aid first responders in case of an emergency, and we don't have definitively secure playgrounds and good lighting outside our buildings. You put a face to that, you put a picture to that. You look at the number of school shootings, I'm sorry, wrong button. If you look at the number of school shootings in our nation, they're increasing all the time. In 2018, over 110 school shooting incidents that year alone. And they keep ebbing and flowing and going up. We've had 19 children in Texas recently, 26 students in Newtown, Connecticut. You see the image on the top left corner of a shot out glass right next to a secure vestibule. Why invest in a secure vestibule if your glass is not shatterproof or bulletproof to protect our kids? And it's really easy for everybody to say, it can't happen here, it can't happen to me. But when I go to sleep at night as an administrator who I feel genuinely responsible to the parents I speak to, the families we serve, I find it unacceptable to say that it's good enough. It is not. So yes, we need those things, and yes, they cost money, and yes, it affects the taxpayer. But what does your child's life cost? What does one child mean to you? To me, there is no price tag whatsoever that you can put on that. In terms of teaching and learning, the environment we learn in absolutely affects our ability to learn. Teaching and learning is going to be something we're going to be very public and transparent about in the months to come. We're going to dig deep into our student academic achievement. We're going to set extremely aggressive goals as a district, as an administrative team. We're going to lean on our teachers who are excellent and capable to reach those goals. And the environment we learn in will affect the ability to learn. It will have an impact. It's not unrelated. The conditions of our building impacts our ability to teach, to hire, and to retain, something that's a constant discussion point in our nation today and in education. And our reputation as a community has implications for the community to grow, to thrive, and to bring people here to live and work. We have, honestly, and this is painful to say, it's not a reflection on this board, this administration, or the previous, just overall as a group, we have honestly in recent years reaped what we have sown. We have continued to get less and less operating costs. We've spent less, invested less, and we've got less when we look at our teaching and learning. I'm really excited to talk about turning that around. I'm really excited to talk about the students and the staff here because I keep saying it. I've been here, Mr. Ranky and I, for about 7 months now. We have amazing kids. We have amazing staff. We have amazing parents. And all those amazing people are excited to do things. But I'm going to say, what happens if we don't? We aren't going to stop. We aren't going to give up. We're not threatening anybody tonight that this has to pass. The people that I've met in education, that I value in education, that we have so many of in Marshall, we care about kids, and we're going to keep doing what's best for kids the best we can. But when I look at those little smiling faces in assemblies, our sports teams on the field, the pictures of them celebrating their accomplishments, our fine arts programs and the amazing programs that they put on and things that they do, I would love to just be able to help and give them better because I care about them. I think our board cares about them, and I hope our community and taxpayers will understand why we're asking for what we believe is the bare minimum to help them. And I'm going to kind of start wrapping it up with saying that we are in Marshall in a fragile state. Marshall academics are unacceptably low. And I'm not putting that on our teachers' backs or anybody's backs. It's something we have to start being open and honest about and setting really firm and strong goals. And building and investing, it'll help. It'll help pride, it'll help morale, it'll help recruitment and retention. Our attendance has dropped and students have been lost to surrounding districts and online platforms. And MPS absolutely has a hiring and recruitment issue right now. As was said earlier, we are ranked 20th from the last of over 520 public schools in the state of Missouri in regard to our levy amount. That's 8 pennies from being the very bottom. 95% of the state of Missouri currently is better able to serve their students based on the levy amount that they have. Pride does not get brought in from the outside. It isn't one principal or one teacher, one superintendent, or even one board member. My kind of part of another quote that I didn't totally get into, but it is the sum of all of our parts, the majority doing what is right, and not what is right for themselves, but what is right for our students, number one. And that is how we will grow our pride and grow our future. And it is truly within the grasp of our hands. To the Board of Education, they took an oath to faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of and for the school district of Marshall. For the conclusion of my presentation tonight, I am making that recommendation to the Board of Education that you move to adopt the resolution, which is Appendix A, and that you consider executing the oath of your duties in your office as board members. And I look forward to the work that follows should you choose to make that motion and approve it. Any questions you have for me tonight?
So can you lay out for us the timeline of what we plan to do with the money once we have it funded?
In terms of like building and construction. So obviously that gets into the real numbers versus preliminary hopeful numbers. But, that's going to be a moving thing in this post-COVID world where things come to us slow. But I think in the short term, to answer your question, in the assumption that we were to put it on the ballot and that it were to be approved, correct? Yep. So Aaron, you want to chip into that if I misspeak, or stop me if you want to add to it?
Focusing on new school, which I
Aaron, I hate to make you get up, but everybody else is going to want to hear this, so can I get you on the microphone, please, sir?
trying to do is
I think this is where people want to hear you a little bit more,
Yeah,
so.
no one thinks you're shy, so.
Assuming a successful vote in April of '23, a safe assumption would be that school would be ready August of '25. So it's a solid 24 months. Before COVID, we may have got a few months off of that, but there's just so many lead time issues that now it's just safe to say 24 months is the assumption. The likelihood of being able to do anything this summer is minimal. We may, by the end, be able to do a little bit, but we'll hardly even have the financing by that point, even if it's approved. But we'll be able to start rolling some smaller projects out over the breaks, if they're small enough, next summer, the holiday break. Some of these things we'll just start rolling out, and we'll try to work around when kids aren't there. And then what we'll plan, though, is in the summer of '24, will be a pretty big summer in terms of renovations and replacements and stuff like that. There'll be things happening all over the district, so that'll be a big timeline there.
And that allows some time for prioritization as well, as those things kind of come up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the sequencing and things that we're going to be looking at as you kind of give us that scope as we go back to our governance plan and look at our, 5, 10, 15-year facilities planning. And so all those things and all those kind of timelines will be coming out and be able to be published and looked at as well.
It's also sort of the mechanism of accountability for us too, right? So what's in our governance plan, what's in our CSIP then becomes our, how we're going to have this financing, let's say, maybe. Then how are we spending it? Well, what priorities have we set, and how does that comport with our governance plan? That's sort of the mechanism of accountability for us.
And all that, and we'll go back to our community discussions that they've had, what community needs and what we actually need as a district, as we're saying, safety and security, vestibules or whatever those would be going forward, so.
Would you
Anything
address
else?
why we're building a elementary building instead of a new high school?
I think that the short answer to that is when we brought Insight in and they brought in the community and they surveyed and said, what do we need? plus looking at what do engineers rate our buildings as in terms of where our greatest need is. It was our 4 elementaries. That's where our greatest need is. Now, I will also say, from any teacher standpoint, curriculum standpoint, knowing that the district academically isn't where they need to be, you change that with your youngest grades. You change that with early childhood, elementary, and the foundations you lay for them. So many things, unfortunately, are determined for students learning by the 3rd grade. If they're 2 grade levels behind by the 3rd grade, that has long-term implications statistically. So I think the fact that we focus on elementary is great. Not only because it's what our buildings clearly need from the engineer standpoint, but from a teaching and learning standpoint, that is where we will turn around the teaching and learning.
Also, I know a lot of times people think of, we build a high school, we move the grades up into those. When Aaron was kind of crunching those numbers for building a high school, I believe came back about $10 or $15 million higher, or even 20. He's sitting me 60 million, I think is what it was
60
total.
million.
So it doubles your expense trying to build something because of the square footage and the things that you need within a high school. So it wasn't feasible with our bonding capacity to go out to that point, or what we could actually do as a district at this time. So when we revisit this one, some of us are a lot older and a lot grayer and farther out, and maybe 2049, it'll be something to look at, or maybe in 2040 as they want to increase maybe levies or things in the future, if we are able to pass something going now, so.
This is where we can be thankful for the fire, probably, some. You know, they've gotten some updates and remodels and new things, and, I mean, honestly, it was an unfortunate time, and it wasn't still, probably isn't perfect, but, I mean, that building is a whole new place, and it actually looks like a school. So, it's awesome. Unfortunately, we had to get it that way, but I hope nothing else burns down in order for us to get something new. Or get some kid to be safe.
I'm
I
knocking
think
on
this is
wood.
where we separate the wants from the needs. You know, everybody wants a new high school because that's what everyone sees. But we need the elementary facility. I mean, we have for a very long time, so.
Mr. President, I'm
Go ahead, sir.
ready to make the motion. Do I have to read the whole thing?
I will read for you unless you'd like to. You do not have to read the whole appendix if you would like to read the bolded part with Shell Marshall. So just so everyone here, we will post the entire appendix as it goes up, and it is the ballot language that we have to submit, and that has to be submitted by the January 24th date. That is why we're here for a special meeting tonight, to make sure that we have everything, if we are voting and moving forward now, then to make sure everything is ready for us to go to the ballot and be on the April election.
A resolution calling the election for Marshall Public Schools, Saline County, Missouri. Be it resolved by the Board of Education of Marshall Public Schools, Saline County, Missouri, as follows. An election is hereby ordered to be held for the Marshall Public Schools, Saline County, Missouri, April 4th, 2023, on the following question. Shall Marshall Public Schools, Saline County, Missouri, be authorized to increase its adjusted operating tax levy 99 cents per $100 of assessed valuation until December 31st, 2049, and to use such funds for operating costs and to acquire, construct, renovate, furnish, equip, and improve new and existing school facilities, including refinancing existing lease agreements. If this proposition is approved, the adjusted operating tax levy of the district is estimated to increase 99 cents from 2.853 to 3.8253. I left out the word currently, please insert it. Per $100 of assessed valuation until December 31st, 2049. There's a section 2, a section 3,
That
and a
is
section
all that
4.
needs to be read for
And a
this,
section 5.
but there are some other things as far as a resolution. For anyone that's seen a resolution, you know that they go on with a few whereases and that's and sections. So there are a couple of other things that do not change the scope of the main paragraph of what the ballot language would be, to change the district levy from 99 cents, basically from 2.8353 to 3.8253. So
Is that a motion?
that was his motion.
I will second.
Thank you, Matt.
Do I got to read that whole thing on my second?
In a British
No, sir, a
accent.
second. Is there any other discussion? I know we've kind of gone back and forth over this quite a bit. I know we've talked with others, various members in the community over several weeks, over the weekend, and at various places as this was coming up. I got asked, even at 5 o'clock tonight, are you guys voting on that tonight? So, yes, we are, is what I said. So, but the votes that really matter will be the votes that happen in April. You know, we can put anything on the ballot we choose to. You all have to make sure you come forward to support your district, your children, and our futures as well, so.
Well, and our work is just starting, right?
Yes.
If we believe in this as a board, then our work is just starting.
Agreed.
Is there a discussion before I go for the question, or Harry calls me to it?
Call the question.
You beat me. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Opposed? Thank you, sir.
What the world?
That is-
With no discussion.
I have to keep notes tonight, so give me just a moment. With nothing else, we will be looking to adjourn to closed session for the purpose of personnel and evaluation. Can I have a
So moved.
motion? Thank you.
Second.
Ellen?
Aye.
Harry?
Aye.
Jack?
Aye.
Aaron?
Yes.
Brad? And Matt?
Oh, yeah, we haven't done it yet.
Thank you all.
An executive session.
Jack, you just lost my vote in the election, buddy. You gotta be for the schools